The morning Catherine Tennant walked into Colton Thorne's ranch house, carrying nothing but a worn carpet bag and her grandmother's sewing kit. She had no idea she would be measuring far more than windows before summer's end. It was June of 1878, and Panamint, California, was still clinging to its mining boom glory, though the silver veins were running thin and folks were starting to talk about moving on. Catherine had arrived on the afternoon stage from San Francisco 2 days prior, answering an advertisement in the newspaper that had seemed almost too good to be true. A rancher needed someone skilled with a needle to make curtains and linens for his newly built home. Room and board included, plus fair wages. After 3 months of taking and mending at her boarding house and barely scraping together enough for rent, the opportunity felt like providence. The ranch sat 5 miles outside of town, nestled in a valley where the Panamint Mountains cast long shadows in the evening. Catherine stood at the front door, smoothing her dark blue travel dress and tucking a strand of copper hair back into her simple bun. She was 22 years old, practical-minded and determinedly optimistic despite the hardships that had brought her west. Her father had died 2 years ago, leaving debts that swallowed their Philadelphia home. Her mother followed him 6 months later, heartbroken and frail. Catherine had no siblings, no husband, and no prospects beyond her skill with a needle and her unwillingness to give up. She knocked firmly. The man who opened the door was not what she expected. Somehow the newspaper advertisement had conjured an image of someone older, perhaps grizzled and rough. Colton Thorne was probably only a few years her senior, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. He was tall and lean, with the kind of build that came from actual work rather than leisure, and when he looked at her, there was a wariness in his expression that matched her own. "Miss Oliver?" he asked, and his voice was deep but not unkind. "Yes, Mr. Thorne. That would be me." He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in. I appreciate you making the trip out here." The interior of the house was spacious but sparse, with good bones but little warmth. The main room had a stone fireplace, solid furniture that looked handmade, and bare windows that let in harsh afternoon light. Everything was clean but impersonal, like a place where someone existed but did not quite live. "I built the house last year," Colton said, following her gaze. "Had help from some of the ranch hands, but they are better with cattle than with making a place feel like home. My mother passed 3 years back, and I have been managing on my own since. Figured it was time to make the place more comfortable." "I am sorry for your loss," Catherine said quietly. Something flickered across his face, appreciation perhaps. "Likewise. The woman in town mentioned you had lost family recently too." Catherine nodded. It seemed they were both carrying grief in their own ways. "Let me show you what I am thinking," Colton continued, moving toward the windows. "There are 6 windows on the ground floor, 4 upstairs. I would like curtains for all of them, something that will keep out the dust and the heat, but still let light through when we want it. I have fabric ordered, should arrive from Los Angeles within the week. Beyond that, I will leave the particulars to you. I am not much for decorating." "What colors were you thinking?" Catherine asked, already assessing the windows and mentally calculating measurements. Colton looked momentarily helpless. "I had not thought that far. What would you suggest?" "Well, what do you like? What makes you feel at ease?" He seemed surprised by the question, as though no one had asked him such a thing in a long time. "Blue, I suppose, like the sky before a storm, and maybe something warm for contrast. The house gets cold in winter." "Blue and gold then," Catherine said decisively. "Or perhaps cream instead of gold, something softer. It will warm the rooms without overwhelming them." "That sounds fine." He paused, then added, Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. I hope it suits. There is a good window for light. Figured you would need that for sewing. I am sure it will be perfect. I will have one of the hands bring your bag up. Supper is at 6. Nothing fancy, but Maria, she cooks for the ranch crew. She makes enough for the house, too. You will meet her tonight. Catherine nodded, taking in the information. This was really happening. She had a job, a place to stay, and a purpose that extended beyond simple survival. Colton cleared his throat. I should mention, there are 12 men who work this ranch. They are good men, respectful, but if any of them give you trouble, you come directly to me. Understood? Understood. All right then. I will let you get settled. He left her there in the main room, his boots heavy on the wooden floors as he headed back outside. Through the bare window, Catherine watched him stride toward the barn, his shoulders set in a way that spoke of someone carrying more weight than just ranch work. The room he had given her was indeed perfect. Simple and clean with whitewashed walls, a sturdy bed covered in a plain quilt, a dresser, and a small table beneath the window. The view looked out over the valley, miles of scrubland dotted with cattle and the mountains rising in the distance. Catherine set her grandmother's sewing kit on the table with reverence. The wooden box was worn smooth from years of use, filled with needles and thread and tiny scissors that still held their edge. It was one of the few things she had left from her old life, and it had crossed the country with her like a talisman. That evening, Catherine met Maria, a round-faced woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She presided over the ranch kitchen with benevolent authority, and she welcomed Catherine with genuine warmth. "It is good to have another woman around," Maria said, ladling stew into bowls. "Too much time with these cowboys, they forget how to be civilized." The ranch hands ate in a separate building, but Catherine took her meals in the main house with Colton. That first dinner was quiet, almost awkward. They sat across from each other at the long wooden table, the space between them filled with the clink of spoons and the crackle of the fire. "The stew is excellent," Catherine offered. "Maria is a fine cook. I am lucky to have her." Another silence. "How long have you been ranching?" she asked, determined to find some common ground. "All my life in one way or another. My father started this spread, but it was smaller then. I have been building it up, adding land, increasing the herd. It is good work. It must be satisfying seeing something grow like that." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. "It is. Though I suppose you understand that too, creating something from raw materials. I never thought of sewing that way, but yes, I suppose so." "What made you come west?" Colton asked, and the question felt genuine, not just polite conversation. Catherine considered how much to share. "I needed a fresh start. Philadelphia held too many memories and not enough opportunities. I saw your advertisement and thought perhaps California might be kinder." "Has it been? Kind, I mean. I am sitting in a beautiful house with a full stomach and honest work ahead of me." "I would say yes. So far it has been kind." Something like a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, I am glad for that." The fabric arrived 4 days later, bolts of beautiful material in shades of blue and cream just as they had discussed. Catherine spread it across the floor of the main room, measuring and cutting with careful precision. Colton had given her free rein of the house during working hours, and she took advantage of it, moving from room to room with her measuring tape and notebook. She quickly fell into a routine. Mornings were spent cutting and pinning, afternoons at the sewing machine that Colton had procured from town, a beautiful Singer machine that ran smooth as butter. Evenings, she hand-stitched the finishing details by lamplight, her fingers flying through familiar motions that soothed her mind. Colton was often out working the ranch during the day, but he always returned by supper. Their dinners slowly grew less awkward, punctuated by longer conversations and genuine interest. Catherine learned that he had been only 23 when his father died suddenly of a heart ailment, leaving him to manage the entire operation. He had grown up fast, taking on responsibilities that would have crushed a lesser man. His mother had helped until her own death, and since then he had been largely alone, pouring himself into work to avoid the emptiness of the house. "Is that why you wanted the curtains?" Catherine asked one evening. "To make it feel less empty." Colton had paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Maybe. Or maybe I just got tired of eating breakfast with the sun blinding me." But the way he said it, with a hint of self-deprecating humor, told her she had struck close to the truth. In turn, Catherine shared pieces of her own story. Her childhood in Philadelphia, where her father had been a clerk and her mother, a seamstress who taught Catherine everything she knew. The happiness of those early years before debt and illness stole it all away. The terrifying freedom of being utterly alone in the world with nothing but her skills and determination to see her through. "You are braver than you give yourself credit for," Colton said one night, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "I do not feel brave. I feel like I am making it up as I go along. That is what brave is, doing it anyway, even when you are scared." The first set of curtains went up in the main room on a bright afternoon 2 weeks after Catherine's arrival. She stood on a chair while Colton held the ladder steady, her hands working the fabric onto the iron rods he had mounted above the windows. When she finally stepped back to look, she felt a surge of pride. The blue fabric filtered the harsh sunlight into something gentle and welcoming, and the cream accents added warmth without fuss. "Well?" she asked, suddenly nervous for his approval. Colton stood in the center of the room, looking around slowly. "It is perfect," he said finally. "It looks like a real home now." The pleasure in his voice made something warm bloom in Catherine's chest. As June melted into July, Catherine finished the downstairs curtains and moved on to the bedrooms upstairs. She worked in companionable solitude, sometimes humming old songs her mother had taught her. Occasionally, she would glance out the window and see Colton working with the horses in the corral, or riding out with his men to check the herd. He moved with an easy confidence in his element, and she found herself watching longer than strictly necessary. One particularly hot afternoon, Maria brought lemonade up to Catherine's workroom. "You are doing beautiful work," the older woman said, admiring the half-finished curtains draped over the chair. "Thank you. It is nice to create something lasting." Maria settled into the spare chair with a knowing look. "He is different since you arrived." Catherine's hand stilled on the fabric. "What do you mean, Mr. Thorne? He smiles more, talks more. Before, he was so closed up inside himself, just work and worry. Now he seems lighter." "I think that is just the house looking nicer." Maria's tone suggested she thought otherwise. "That man needs someone to care for. He has been alone too long, carrying everything by himself. You are good for him." Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "I am just here to sew curtains." "If you say so, dear." Maria patted her hand and left, but her words lingered. That night at dinner, Catherine found herself studying Colton more carefully. Was he different? He certainly seemed more relaxed than that first stiff meeting, and he talked more freely now, sharing stories about the ranch and asking about her day. When he laughed at something she said, the sound seemed to fill the room with unexpected light. "What?" he asked, catching her looking. "Nothing. I just realized I do not know very much about you beyond the ranch. What do you do for pleasure?" He looked genuinely puzzled. "Pleasure?" "Yes, you know, things you enjoy. Reading, music, anything." "I suppose I have not thought much about it. The ranch takes most of my time. But surely you must do something. What did you do before all this responsibility fell on you? Colton leaned back in his chair, considering. I used to read quite a bit. My mother loved books, always had something new ordered from San Francisco, and I liked riding just for the sake of it, not to check fences or move cattle. You still have the books, upstairs in my room, gathering dust mostly. You should read again, Catherine said firmly. All work makes for a dull life. Is that so? He was smiling now, a genuine warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. That is so. In fact, I insist. You should read for at least 30 minutes each evening. You insist? I do. Consider it payment for providing such a wonderful workspace. Well, if you insist. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary, and Catherine felt her breath catch. The next evening, Colton appeared at dinner with a well-worn copy of Washington Irving's stories. Satisfactory? He asked, showing her the book. Most satisfactory. After the meal was cleared, they moved to the main room where Catherine had her hand sewing and Colton settled into the chair by the fireplace with his book. It was comfortable and domestic in a way that made Catherine's heart ache with unexpected longing. This was what a home should feel like, this quiet companionship, this shared space. Would you read aloud? She asked impulsively. Colton looked up, surprised. Really, if you do not mind. I always loved being read to. So he began to read, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Catherine stitched steadily, listening to the story unfold, and felt more content than she had in years. This became their new routine. After dinner, they would settle in the main room, Colton reading while Catherine sewed. Sometimes they would talk instead, long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing. Catherine learned that Colton wanted to expand into horse breeding, that he had a weakness for apple pie, that he worried constantly about the ranch, and whether he was honoring his father's legacy properly. Colton learned that Catherine had once dreamed of opening her own dress shop, that she missed the ocean even though Philadelphia was not quite coastal, that she had never expected to find peace in the California desert, but somehow she had. You think you will stay? He asked one night in late July. After the curtains are finished, I mean. The question made Catherine's hand still. She had been trying not to think about it. The work was nearly done, just a few more rooms to go. What would happen then? I do not know, she admitted. I suppose I will need to find more work. Perhaps in town there must be people who need sewing done. You could stay here. Her heart jumped. What? Colton set down his book, his expression serious. There is always mending to be done, clothes for the ranch hands, household things. And Maria has been wanting help with preserving and cooking for the winter. It would not be just sewing, but if you wanted to stay, there is a place for you here. You are offering me a permanent position. I am offering you a home if you want it. The weight of those words settled between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. I would like that very much, Catherine said softly. Something in Colton's face relaxed, as though he had been holding his breath. Good. That is good. But even as relief flooded through her, Catherine felt a pang of something more complicated. She was not just staying for the work, and she suspected Colton was not just offering it for practical reasons. The feelings growing between them were becoming harder to ignore, present in every shared glance and comfortable silence. August arrived with scorching heat that made afternoon work nearly impossible. Catherine took to rising early, sewing in the cool morning hours before the sun turned her workroom into an oven. One such morning, she finished the last of the upstairs curtains and stood back to survey her work with satisfaction. Every window in the house now had beautiful coverings, transforming the stark spaces into something warm and welcoming. She found Colton in the barn, working with a young horse that was still learning to accept a saddle. I finished, she announced. He looked up, pushing his hat back. "The curtains. Every last one. That is wonderful. I want to see." They walked back to the house together, and Catherine gave him a full tour, pointing out the special touches in each room. Colton followed, taking it all in with evident pleasure. "You have made this house into a real home," he said when they returned to the main room. "I cannot thank you enough. It was my pleasure, truly." They stood there in the filtered blue light, and Catherine was acutely aware of how close he was standing, the warmth radiating from him, the way he was looking at her like she was something precious. "Catherine," he started, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "Yes. These past 2 months, having you here, it has meant more to me than just the improvements to the house. You have brought life back into this place. Into me, if I am being honest." Her breath caught. "Colton, I know it is probably too soon to say such things, and if I am reading this wrong, please tell me and we will never speak of it again. But I think I have come to care for you, quite a lot actually, and I am hoping that maybe you feel the same." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I do feel the same. I have been trying not to, thinking it was foolish or too fast, but I cannot seem to help it." The smile that broke across Colton's face was like sunrise. "Really, really." He reached for her hands, folding them carefully in his larger ones. "Then maybe we can see where this goes. No pressure, no expectations, just see what happens. I would like that very much." He raised one of her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles, and Catherine felt the simple gesture all the way to her toes. Their courtship, if it could be called that, unfolded gradually over the following weeks. There was no dramatic declaration or grand gesture, just a slow deepening of what was already there. Colton began to reach for her hand when they walked, to sit closer during their evening reading sessions. Catherine found herself touching his arm when she spoke to him, leaning into his space in ways both natural and thrilling. Their first real kiss happened on a Sunday afternoon in mid-August. Colton had convinced Catherine to take a break from her work and go riding with him. She was not an experienced rider, but he found her a gentle mare and helped her into the saddle with patient hands. They rode out into the valley, following a dry creek bed up into the foothills. Colton pointed out landmarks, told her stories about growing up on this land, and Catherine drank it all in, loving the animation in his face when he talked about things he cared for. They stopped beneath a stand of cottonwood trees where the creek still held a trickle of water. Colton helped Catherine down from her horse, his hands steady on her waist, but instead of releasing her, he let his hands linger, drawing her closer. "I have been wanting to do something," he said, his voice low. "What is that?" Instead of answering, he cupped her face gently and kissed her. It was sweet and careful, a question as much as a statement. Catherine answered by sliding her arms around his neck, kissing him back with all the feelings she had been holding inside. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Colton rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you, Catherine Oliver," he whispered. "I am falling in love with you too, Colton Thorne." After that, things shifted into something deeper. They were more open with their affection, more honest with their feelings. The ranch hands certainly noticed, and Maria looked smugly satisfied, as though she had known all along. One evening in early September, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Colton brought up the future. "I have been thinking," he started, his arm around Catherine's shoulders, "about what comes next. What comes next for us. I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I am not a young man who plays games. I know what I want, and I want you. Permanently." Catherine's heart began to race. "What are you saying?" Colton shifted, turning to face her fully. "I am saying that I would like to marry you if you will have me." I know I should probably wait longer, court you properly, but every day I wake up and you are here, and it feels right in a way nothing else ever has. You stitched yourself into every corner of my heart, Catherine, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it now." Tears streamed down Catherine's face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and sure, and Catherine felt the last pieces of her broken heart knit themselves back together. They were married in October, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Tennant. Maria and the ranch hands attended, along with a few people from town who had become friendly with Catherine during her occasional trips for supplies. Catherine wore a dress she had sewn herself, pale blue silk that she had been saving for something special, and Colton wore his best suit and looked at her like she hung the moon. The circuit preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Colton kissed her, Catherine felt the rightness of it echo through her entire being. This was home. This was where she was meant to be. The ranch hands threw them a celebration back at the ranch, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. Catherine danced with Colton beneath the stars, his arms strong around her, and thought about how far she had come from that desperate woman who answered a newspaper advertisement. Their wedding night was tender and careful, both of them nervous but eager. Colton was gentle, making sure Catherine felt safe and cherished, and when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, a physical confirmation of everything they had already built emotionally. Afterward, lying in Colton's arms in the darkness of their bedroom, Catherine traced idle patterns on his chest. "What are you thinking?" he murmured. "That I am happier than I ever thought I would be again. That I came here to sew curtains and found everything I did not know I was looking for." "I am the lucky one," Colton said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You brought my house to life. You brought me to life." "We brought each other to life," Catherine corrected. "I suppose we did." They fell asleep tangled together, and Catherine dreamed of bright futures and endless possibilities. Married life suited them both. Catherine continued her sewing, taking in work from town and making clothes for the ranch hands. She also began helping Maria more in the kitchen, learning to preserve fruits and vegetables for the winter, mastering the art of feeding a dozen hungry men. Colton threw himself into his plans for horse breeding, using Catherine as a sounding board for his ideas. They developed routines and rhythms unique to them. Morning coffee on the porch before the day started in earnest. Stolen kisses in the barn when Colton came in from riding. Evening reading sessions that now often devolved into other activities, as they explored their physical connection with increasing confidence and joy. Winter arrived, and the house that had once seemed so cold and empty now felt warm and full of life. The curtains Catherine had made kept out the worst of the drafts, and the fire in the hearth burned bright. They hosted Christmas dinner for the ranch hands, and Catherine cooked alongside Maria, both of them red-faced and laughing as they orchestrated the elaborate meal. Colton gave Catherine a beautiful sewing basket for Christmas, handcrafted from local wood and lined with velvet. Catherine gave him a new saddle blanket she had woven herself in shades of blue and cream to match the curtains. "So I will always carry a piece of home with me," he said, running his hands over the intricate pattern. "Always," Catherine confirmed. That night, wrapped in quilts and each other's arms, Colton mentioned children for the first time. "You want them?" he asked. "I should have asked before we married, I suppose, but I am asking now." "I do," Catherine said. "I always thought I would have a family someday. What about you? I want everything with you. Children, grandchildren, growing old together on this ranch, all of it. Then that is what we will have." Spring came, and with it the hard work of calving season. Catherine saw less of Colton during these weeks, as he spent long hours out with the herd ensuring the new calves survived. But he always came home to her, exhausted but satisfied, and Catherine always had hot food and warm affection waiting. It was in April that Catherine began to suspect she might be pregnant. She missed her monthly courses, and her breasts felt tender in a way they never had before. She waited another month to be sure, then told Maria before telling Colton, needing confirmation from another woman that she was not imagining things. "You are definitely expecting," Maria said with a broad smile. "I can always tell. You have that glow. How do I tell him?" "However feels right to you, dear." Catherine decided to tell him at dinner that night. She had made all his favorites, and as they sat down to eat, she could barely contain her excitement. "You are fidgeting," Colton observed with amusement. "What is going on? I have news." "Good news, I hope," given that smile. "The best news. Colton, I am going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, processing. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He stood so abruptly his chair fell backward, coming around the table to pull her into his arms. "Truly, you are certain as I can be. Maria seems to think so too." He kissed her soundly, then dropped to his knees and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Catherine laughed, running her fingers through his hair. "We have months yet. I do not care. I am already in love." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Catherine continued her work as long as she was able, then spent the later months preparing the nursery in one of the spare bedrooms. She sewed tiny clothes and blankets, embroidering them with delicate patterns. Colton built a cradle from oak, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. They talked endlessly about names and possibilities, their hands intertwined over Catherine's growing belly. "What if it is a boy?" Colton asked one night. "Then he will probably want to be a rancher like his father. What if it is a girl?" "Then she can be anything she wants to be," Colton smiled. "I like that answer." Labor began on a cold November night, exactly 1 year after they had married. Catherine woke Colton with a gasp, gripping his arm as the first real contraction hit. "It is time," she said. Colton went pale but sprang into action. He sent one of the hands racing for the doctor in town and another for Maria. He stayed with Catherine, holding her hand and letting her squeeze as hard as she needed when the pains came. The doctor arrived as dawn broke, a competent older man who had delivered half the babies in Inyo County. He examined Catherine and declared everything progressing normally. "First babies take their time," he said. "Could be hours yet." It was hours. Long, exhausting hours where Catherine labored and Colton refused to leave her side despite everyone telling him it was not proper for husbands to be present. He wiped her face with cool cloths, murmured encouragement, and let her curse him soundly when the pain got too intense. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, the doctor told Catherine to push. She bore down with everything she had, Colton supporting her shoulders, and after what felt like an eternity, a baby's cry filled the room. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy boy." Catherine burst into tears as the doctor placed the baby on her chest. He was red-faced and furious, but absolutely perfect. Colton stared down at them both with wonder written across his face. "We have a son," he whispered. "We have a son," Catherine repeated. They named him James after Colton's father. James Thorne came into the world with his mother's copper hair and his father's dark eyes, and from the moment he took his first breath, he had both his parents completely besotted. The first months were exhausting. James was a demanding baby who seemed to sleep only when it was least convenient. Catherine walked the floors with him at all hours, singing the songs her mother had sung to her. Colton would find them in the rocking chair at dawn, both asleep, and carefully take the baby so Catherine could rest properly. "You are a natural at this," Catherine murmured one such morning as Colton settled James in his cradle. "I am terrified every second that I will do something wrong. That is how I know you are a good father. You care enough to worry." As James grew, his personality emerged. He was curious and determined, crawling early and getting into everything. Catherine baby proofed the house as best she could, but James had a talent for finding danger. Colton took it all in stride, simply keeping a closer eye on their adventurous son. When James was 2, Catherine became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, and she spent the last months on bed rest per the doctor's orders. Colton hired a woman from town to help with James and the household work, but he still insisted on caring for Catherine himself whenever possible. "You do not have to do this," Catherine protested as he brought her breakfast in bed. "I want to." "You carried our children. The least I can do is carry some breakfast." Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, was born in the spring of 1882. She was smaller than James had been but no less fierce, announcing her presence with lusty cries that suggested a strong will. James was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her constantly under careful supervision. "Gentle," Catherine would remind him. "Baby Rose is very small." "Baby," James would repeat solemnly, patting Rose's head with chubby toddler hands. The ranch continued to thrive. Colton's horse breeding program was successful, and they were now selling trained horses throughout California and Nevada. Catherine had turned her sewing into a small business, employing 2 women from town to help with orders. Between the ranch and her work and the children, life was full to bursting. But it was also joyful. Catherine had never imagined she could be this happy, this fulfilled. Every morning, she woke in Colton's arms and felt grateful for the newspaper advertisement that had brought her here, for the courage to answer it, for everything that had followed. One evening, when James was 4 and Rose was 2, Catherine and Colton sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard under Maria's supervision. The sun was setting, painting everything golden, and Colton's arm was warm around Catherine's shoulders. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Catherine asked. "If I had not seen that advertisement or if I had been too scared to answer it." "I try not to," Colton admitted. "It is too terrible to imagine. You are my whole world, Catherine, you and the children. I cannot picture my life without you in it. I feel the same. I came here broken and lost, and you helped me find myself again." "We found each other," Colton corrected, echoing her words from their wedding night. "Neither of us was whole until we met." Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder, watching James chase Rose around the yard with peals of laughter. "Do you think we will have more children? Do you want more? Maybe 1 or 2 more. I like our family. I want to make it bigger." Colton pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then we will have more. As many as you want." True to her word, Catherine had 2 more children over the next 5 years. Another boy, Thomas, born in 1884, and finally another girl, Clara, in 1886. Their family complete, Catherine devoted herself to raising her children and running her sewing business while Colton continued to expand the ranch. Life was not without challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers. Cattle were lost to disease and horses to accidents. James broke his arm falling from a tree when he was 6, giving Catherine the worst fright of her life. Rose developed a cough one winter that lasted weeks and had them all terrified before it finally broke. But through it all, Catherine and Colton faced everything together. They had built something strong, a partnership rooted in love and respect and genuine friendship. They still read together in the evenings when they could steal moments alone. They still found time to ride out into the valley, just the two of them, remembering that first ride when everything changed. As the years passed, Panamint slowly declined. The silver mines played out and people moved on to new boomtowns. But the ranch remained, a constant in a changing landscape. Catherine and Colton became pillars of the small community that remained, hosting gatherings and helping neighbors. Their children grew. James became a skilled horseman like his father, taking naturally to ranch work. Rose surprised everyone by becoming fascinated with her mother's sewing business, showing real talent with a needle by age 8. Thomas was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book, and Clara was pure mischief, keeping everyone on their toes. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Colton took Catherine back to the cottonwood trees where they had first kissed. The creek was running full from spring rains and wildflowers dotted the grass. "I wanted to bring you back here," Colton said, helping her down from her horse. "To the place where I first told you I was falling in love with you." "I remember," Catherine said softly. "I remember everything about that day." "These have been the best 10 years of my life," Colton continued. "You have given me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just work. You saved me, Catherine." "We saved each other," she insisted, but she was crying happy tears. Colton pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate gold locket on a chain. "Open it," he urged. Catherine opened the locket to find tiny photographs of their 4 children and one of Colton himself. "So you can carry us all with you," he said. "The way I carry you in my heart every day." Catherine threw her arms around him, kissing him deeply. "I love you so much. I love you too. Today, tomorrow, always." They made love there under the cottonwood trees like newlyweds, then lay tangled together in the grass, talking about their dreams for the future. "What do you think happens next?" Catherine asked. "The children will grow up and leave eventually." "Then it will be just us again," Colton said. "Like it was in the beginning, but better because we will have all these memories and experiences. I plan to spend my old age spoiling you rotten and finally taking you to see the ocean you miss." "I do not miss it anymore," Catherine admitted. "This is home now. You are home." The years continued their steady march. The children grew into young adults with their own dreams and ambitions. James took over more of the ranch operations, showing a skill for management that made Colton proud. Rose opened her own dressmaking shop in town with Catherine's help, becoming known throughout the county for her beautiful work. Thomas went away to university in San Francisco, the first in the family to pursue higher education. Clara married a good man from a neighboring ranch and started her own family. Catherine and Colton became grandparents, and they embraced the role with joy. They spoiled their grandchildren shamelessly, filling the house with laughter and chaos during visits. The ranch that had once seemed so empty now overflowed with life and love across generations. On their 25th anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house, spilling out onto the porch and into the yard. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. Catherine stood on the porch watching it all, Colton's arm around her waist, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Colton asked, reading her mood as he always could. "That I could not have imagined any of this when I first knocked on your door. That shy girl with her carpetbag and sewing kit, she had no idea what she was walking into." "Neither did the lonely rancher who opened that door," Colton said with a smile. "He thought he was just hiring someone to make curtains. And I stitched myself into every corner of your heart instead. That you did. Best decision I ever made, posting that advertisement. Best decision I ever made answering it." James called them over for a toast, and the whole family raised their glasses to Catherine and Colton, celebrating their 25 years of marriage. Catherine looked around at all these people who existed because she had been brave enough to start over, because Colton had been open enough to let her in. This was her legacy, not just the curtains or the sewing business, but this family, this love that would ripple forward through generations. As the party wound down and people began to leave, Catherine and Colton retreated to their bedroom, exhausted but happy. Colton helped Catherine with her dress buttons, his fingers still nimble despite the years. "I would marry you again tomorrow," he said suddenly. "In fact, I would marry you every day for the rest of my life if I could." "That seems excessive," Catherine teased, but she was touched. "Maybe, but it is true. You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, even when I am old and gray." Catherine gestured to her hair, which had started showing silver strands. "Especially then. You are aging like fine wine, getting better with time." They climbed into bed, the same bed they had shared for 25 years, and Colton pulled Catherine close. "I used to be so lonely," he murmured into the darkness. "Before you. This house was full of ghosts and memories, and I was just going through the motions. You brought color and life and purpose to everything." "You did the same for me," Catherine said. "I was so lost, Colton. Adrift and alone and scared. You gave me a place to belong, a reason to hope. You gave me love when I thought I would never have it. We really did save each other. We really did." They fell asleep as they had every night for a quarter century, wrapped in each other's arms, safe and loved and home. The years that followed were kind to them. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management, though Colton still rode out most days, unable to completely step away from the work that had defined his life. Catherine finally slowed down her sewing business, taking only special commissions that interested her and spending more time with her grandchildren. They traveled a bit, taking that trip to the ocean Colton had promised. Catherine stood on the beach in San Francisco and felt the salt spray on her face, and while it was beautiful, she was eager to return to the desert and mountains she had come to love. They hosted family gatherings and holiday celebrations. They supported their children and grandchildren through triumphs and struggles. They remained active in their community, helping where they could, always ready with a meal or advice or just a listening ear. As they moved into their 60s, Colton and Catherine began to slow down. Colton's knees bothered him after long days riding, and Catherine's eyes were not as sharp for fine needlework. But their love remained constant, as strong as it had been that first evening when Catherine finished the curtains, and Colton realized he could not imagine his life without her. On their 40th anniversary, they decided to renew their vows in the same church where they had married. Their children arranged everything, and the whole community turned out to celebrate. Catherine wore a dress that Rose had made specially for the occasion, and Colton wore a suit that still fit despite the years. As they stood before the same altar, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes, the preacher asked if they wanted to share any words before the renewal. "40 years ago," Colton began, his voice still strong despite his age, "I posted an advertisement for someone to sew curtains. I thought I was hiring a seamstress. Instead, I found my soulmate, my partner, my very best friend. Catherine has been my constant through every joy and sorrow, every triumph and failure. She has given me a beautiful family and a life full of meaning. I am grateful every single day that she answered that advertisement and walked into my life." Catherine was crying now, as she had on their first wedding day. "I came to California broken and afraid, running from grief and looking for a fresh start. Colton gave me so much more than a job. He gave me a home, a family, and a love I had not known was possible. Every day with him has been a gift. I would choose him again and again, in this life and any other. There was not a dry eye in the church as they renewed their vows, promising to love and cherish each other for whatever years remained. When they kissed, their children and grandchildren cheered, and Catherine felt the circle of their love complete and whole. The party afterward was joyous. Catherine and Colton danced together like they had on their first wedding night, moving slower now but with the same joy. They were surrounded by the evidence of their love. 3 generations gathered to celebrate them, and it felt perfect. "We did good," Colton murmured in Catherine's ear as they swayed to the music. "We did very good," Catherine agreed. They lived well into their 70s, blessed with good health and sharp minds. They were there for the birth of great-grandchildren, holding tiny babies and marveling at how the cycle continued. They celebrated 50th anniversary, though it was quieter this time, just family gathering at the ranch house. Colton passed first, at the age of 77, slipping away peacefully in his sleep with Catherine beside him. It was how he would have wanted it, quick and at home. Catherine grieved deeply, but found comfort in their children and in the memories they had built together. She stayed on at the ranch, now run by James and his sons, refusing to leave the house that held so much of her heart. She spent her final years surrounded by family, sewing when her eyes allowed it, telling stories about the old days to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She would sit on the porch in the evening, looking out at the mountains and valleys, remembering a younger version of herself walking up to this house with nothing but hope and determination. Catherine passed away at 81 in her sleep, in the same bed where she had spent so many happy nights with Colton. Her family laid her to rest beside him in the small cemetery outside Tennant, their headstones side by side facing the mountains. On Catherine's headstone, her children had inscribed, "She came to sew curtains and stayed to build a life. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend." The ranch house still stood for generations after, passed down through the family. The curtains Catherine made that first summer were long gone, replaced many times over, but the love that had been born within those walls endured. James's grandchildren would eventually tell their own children the story of how it all began, with a newspaper advertisement and a woman brave enough to answer it. The tale of Colton and Catherine became family legend, a reminder that sometimes the things we are searching for find us in the most unexpected ways. That sometimes a practical arrangement can become the greatest love story. That courage and hope and an open heart can transform everything. And somewhere, in the fabric of that old house, in the very walls and foundation, the love between a lonely rancher and a brave seamstress remained woven tight, a testament to a love that truly lasted forever. 2 people who had each been broken by loss had found each other and built something beautiful, something lasting, something that rippled forward through time in the faces and hearts of those who came after. The story of the cowboy who hired her to sew curtains, and the woman who stitched herself into every corner of his heart, lived on long after they were gone. Proof that the very best love stories are the ones we write ourselves, one day at a time, with patience and hope and an unwavering commitment to each other. Their love had been real and deep and true, tested by time and circumstance and always prevailing. It was exactly the kind of love both of them had needed, the kind they had found in each other, and it had been worth every moment.